Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to peek behind the curtain on something we all do, 1,000 times a day, without even thinking about it, clicking a mouse. We're going to break down exactly what happens inside a program, from the second your finger presses down to the moment a new line or a new shape pops up on the screen. Let's trace that whole journey.
So just picture a simple drawing app. You click, you drag, you let go, and boom, there's a line. But how? How does the code actually translate that physical movement into a visual thing on your monitor? That's the big question we're going to unpack right here.
Okay, so the secret to making all of this work without turning into a complete mess of code is a really powerful design pattern called Model View Controller, or MVC for short. The easiest way to think about it is like an organizational chart for your app. It gives everyone a specific job. One part handles the data, one part handles the display, and one part handles user input. It keeps everything neat and tidy.
Now, what's really cool is how strict this process is. It's always in this order. First, you, the user, do something. That's the event. That immediately triggers a function in the controller. Now here's the key part. The controller's only job is to talk to the model, which is just the app's data. It changes a number, like a coordinate. And only then does the view wake up, look at the new data, and redraw the screen. You'll notice the controller never, ever draws anything itself. That's not its job.
So what is this special function in the controller? Well, it's called an event handler. It's basically a piece of code that's just listening. It's not running all the time. It's just waiting for the operating system to tap it on the shoulder and say, hey, the user just clicked the mouse. Time for you to run.
All right, enough theory. Let's make this real. We're going to start building out the logic for our little drawing app. And every line has a beginning and an end, which, surprise, surprise, maps perfectly to a mouse press and a mouse release.
Our very first event handler is called onMousePress. The instant a mouse button goes down, the system calls this exact function, and it gives it some really important info, the mouse X and mouse Y coordinates, where the click happened, and a reference to our application's model, which we'll just call the app object. Think of that app object as the brain that holds all our data.
So this is super important. You have to understand the very strict job description for onMousePress. Its one and only job is to update the model. That is it. The big red X here is for real. It's probably the most important rule in MVC. The controller and functions like onMousePress can never, ever draw directly to the screen. It can only change the data.
And here's the perfect example. When we press the mouse to start drawing our line, onMousePress just takes those mouse X and mouse Y coordinates it was given and stores them somewhere in the model. We might make a variable like app.lineStartLocation and just tuck the coordinates away there. Job done.
Of course, every press needs a release. So to balance out onMousePress, we've got its partner, onMouseRelease. This function gets called the second you let go of the mouse button. And just like onMousePress, it gets the app object and the coordinates of where your mouse was when you let go.
Looking at them side by side like this makes it super clear, right? onMousePress kicks the whole thing off. It grabs the start point and basically tells the model, hey, get ready. Then onMouseRelease comes in to finish the job. It grabs the endpoint and tells the model, all right, we're done here, the line is finished. They're a perfect little team.
Okay, that's cool for drawing a line between 2 points. But, modern apps give us feedback as we're doing things. We don't just want to see the final line. We want to see it being drawn while we drag the mouse. So, how do we handle that in-between part of the action?
Exactly. We've got the start and we've got the end. But what about all that movement in the middle? A press and a release are just single moments in time. But a drag is a continuous action, right? That's going to need a totally new kind of event handler.
And here it is, onMouseDrag. This one is special. It only gets called when the mouse is moving while a button is being held down. And it doesn't just get called once. It gets called over and over and over again, dozens of times a second, for every little pixel your mouse moves during that drag.
So what's it doing every single time it's called? Well, it's following the same rule as all the others. It just updates the model. As we drag our mouse, it's constantly updating a variable, let's call it app.lineEndLocation, with the mouse's current mouse X and mouse Y. This lets the view redraw the line in real time because the endpoint is always up to date.
This whole thing introduces a really powerful idea called a state variable. Your app often needs to know what mode it's in. Like, are we just moving the mouse around, or are we actively in the middle of drawing a line? A simple true-false variable, something like app.draggingLine, is perfect for keeping track of that.
And just look how cleanly this works. When the app first starts, we're not dragging anything, so that variable is false. The moment onMousePress gets called, we flip the switch to true.
We are now officially in the dragging state. And as soon as we let go, on-mouse release flips it right back to false. See? We've perfectly captured the entire duration of that drag action with one simple variable.
And this is why that state variable is so amazing. Now our view function, our redraw all, can be a lot smarter. It can just have a simple if statement that says, hey, is app dragging line true? Okay, if it is, draw the line with the dash style to show it's temporary. Otherwise, draw it as a solid final line. This is MVC at its absolute best. The controller manages the state, and the view just reacts to whatever that state is. So clean.
All right, let's put all these pieces together. We're going to look at the full sequence of events, from just moving the mouse around on the screen to pressing, dragging, and finally releasing to create our finished line.
There's actually one last handler to complete the set, onMoveMouse. This one's the simplest of all. It just gets called whenever the mouse moves, period. Doesn't matter if a button is up or down. This is super useful for things like hover effects, right? Like making a button light up when your mouse goes over it, before you even click.
This slide right here is basically your cheat sheet. It sums up everything we've talked about. Each event handler has its own unique trigger and its own specific job, but notice the one thing they all have in common. Their main purpose is to update some variable in the model. onMouseMove handles what happens before the click. onMousePress kicks things off. onMouseDrag keeps things updated, and onMouseRelease finishes the action.
So, yeah, we've gone really deep on mouse clicks, but why does this pattern matter so much? Because, honestly, it's not just about the mouse. It's about a fundamental way of thinking about how to build any interactive software.
This is the big takeaway. This separation of jobs, letting the controller handle events and change data, and then letting the view handle drawing based on that data, that's the secret sauce. It makes your code way easier to read, 100 times easier to debug, and it means you can add more features later without everything breaking.
And that's because the exact same logic applies to pretty much everything else. A keyboard press? Well, that's an event that triggers an on-key press handler. An animation that needs to update 30 times a second? That's just a timer event firing an on-step handler. A finger swiping across a phone? Same deal. You haven't just learned how to handle a mouse, you've learned the fundamental pattern for handling almost any kind of user input.
So, now you get it. You know the code behind the click. You understand that handshake between the model, the view, and the controller. You've seen how these simple focused event handlers can build really complex, interactive behavior. So the only question left is, with this powerful pattern in your toolkit, what are you going to build next?